In this demo, we're going to have a look at the use of the emulators within Android Studio. We'll also look very briefly at how we can unlock developer mode on actual phone. And we'll finish up by looking at Logcat, which is one of the more useful mechanisms where we can get information out in terms of what's happening within our running programs. So, assuming first of all that we have Visual Studio open, whatever everything you have. Now, in terms of developing for this, we're going to be developing on PC, on a Mac. Ultimately, yes, you'll want to deploy to an Android device, and we've got two options. Either we'll have an actual physical device like a phone or a tablet or something more fancy like one of the Wear items, or we can use an emulator. We can simulate these different devices on our computers. So we're going to have a look at creating an emulator first of all. We can do this within Android Studio. If you go up to the Tools menu, down to Android, and we're going to select AVD Manager. So Android Virtual Device is acronym for AVD. Whenever we open that up, it will show us the different virtual devices that we have created on this machine. So there's one at the minute. You can see it's a Nexus 7 2012 running ABI 21. There's a few options we have in terms of this here. If you right click on it, you get sort of a context sensitive menu. You can delete some of them. We could start that off. We could edit some settings on it if we want to. But let's assume we've just done it and it's empty, so we want to actually create a device that we want to emulate a certain physical device. So down at the bottom there's the Create Virtual Device button. We click on that and it brings us up a kind of useful menu that highlights the different types of devices that we can create. Now, you get a bit of feel of some of the diversity of the platforms in which Android can run. So there's different phases to this. The first phase is to specify what type of hardware, notionally, we're running Android on. And the second phase after that is then going to say which version of Android are we running on that selected hardware. So you can see here we've got categories. We've got one for phones with a number of sort of either Google branded phones or sort of generic phones. Tablets, similar to Google branded tablets and some generic ones. Also wearables with circular or round screens, and finally for Android powered TVs. So we're assuming we're developing for tablet or for phone, so we're going to use that particular one. It's worthwhile noting here that, so for example, if you pick a Nexus 10, so it's a 10-inch screen, obviously. You've got the resolution of the device. That is actually going to be important. And it's important because we can notionally try to emulate either a very simple device or a top-end device. And we have to have enough computing oomph on the emulating platform to be able to handle, to simulate that device. So if we were to go for the full resolution Nexus 10, then that's quite a lot of pixels that we're pushing through that has to go through our emulating device. The reason I say this is that quite a lot of students, when they're doing the modules, they'll have a laptop that they've got for university. Brilliant. Sometimes that laptop, it was bought around Christmas time. It was a bargain. It was a couple £100 in terms of expense. Fantastic. Although if you're sitting with a laptop or a PC that's a few years old, that only has, say, 4 gigs of RAM, maybe doesn't have that many cores in terms of the processor, you'll probably find that the process of emulating a tablet is likely to be slow. And therein, it makes most sense to try to emulate a very low-end device. Now, you can play about with this here. You can try some high-end, you can try some low-end, you can see how quick it starts up, how usable the thing is. But ultimately, you want to dial it back until you find something that'll work well in your particular platform. So we're going to initially, you can do a new hardware profile if you want, but we'll take our 7-inch tablet. Now, just if we were to do clone, you can see some of the properties that are coming up with this here, that it is a phone and a tablet, notionally 7-inch screen. Here's the screen resolution, which is pretty low by today's standard, but that's perfectly fine. Here's the important, or an important bit, is the amount of memory. So, quite often some of the new tabs, 2 gigs of RAM, but if you emulate that, then your emulator is going to set aside 2 gigs of RAM for it. So again, if you're running on 4 gigs in an old laptop, that's going to be a bit of a stretch. So 512 megs of RAM, again, it's low end for a tablet, but it'll do for the types of games that we're going to create in most cases. If you want, you can say whether or not it has simulate or emulate hardware buttons, types of modes that it supports, cameras and sensors. Now, it's an emulator, so if you say that you want to emulate an accelerometer, it basically means your app, if it tries to find it, the emulator is going to report back, sure, I have it, but it's not actually going to return any meaningful information unless you've got your way to mock up what that would be. Final thing I want to mention is the default skin. Again, you can try this out to find one that matches your preference. I find that the default no skin one not particularly nice, so I'm just going to say it has a Nexus 7 skin. That's the way that it's going to look. So we'll do OK on that, and it's then going to add in this basic tablet of that form, and if I do next, I get to select which version of Android I want to deploy on the actual device. So we've got a list appearing here from KitKat through to Lollipop to Marshmallow, the most recent one available at the minute. There's a little box down at the bottom, show downloadable system images. If we were to click on that, it'll show all, well, it'll not show all of them, but it'll show a number of sensible options, all the way back to Gingerbread if you're really supporting in very old devices. And if you wanted to, you could install these different ones on it. This is a good thing if you actually are publishing anything up in the App Store, because you do want to just at least check that the thing you're writing will run on versions of Android that are commonly used. This one here, you can see some options. For example, under Lollipop, or actually say KitKat, you've got the type of processor notionally that's been emulated. So Intel x86 or 64-bit x86 or an ARM processor. In most cases, you'll be running the emulator on a piece of Intel hardware, your MacBook or your laptop. Intel has an accelerator that comes along with Android Studio, so it's installed by default, HAMX, and it actually speeds up the process of emulating a tablet using an Intel processor when running on an actual Intel machine in the first place. So generally speaking, you can try it out, but generally speaking, using an Intel one is a good way of doing it. For the API version, so I'll come into what you want to use, what you have in your device. There are differences here, and generally 21, 22 onwards, the emulator actually runs a bit smoother, a bit faster. So I'll go for Lollipop, why not? 22 as our particular version. So we'll do next in that one. Now, almost there, we've got to give a name for it. It doesn't like a few characters in it. So this is our cheap tablet. So again, we're using our 7-inch, reasonably low resolution tablet running modern version of Android. The startup size orientations can be important. So it's set to auto at the minute, but there are a number of options down here. I'm going to go for this one here. So 2 device independent pixels on, so basically 2 pixels, if you like, on the device correspond to 1 pixel on screen. Now, if I did 1:1, it means that when I'm displaying it on this screen, I'll have 600 by 1024, which is going to be a bit large for the actual window I'm using for recording this on. So we're going for 2 device independent pixels on the device for 1 pixel on screen. My on-screen resolution here will be 300 by 512, which will work out fine. Again, you can try about different options to find one that works for you. Orientation, portrait landscape, I'll start up on landscape, why not? The underlying options, these are important for use host GPU or store a snapshot for faster startup, and I'll come back to those in a second. There are some advanced settings if you want to change the amount of RAM or the size of the heap, things like that. Generally, they're okay as is. But we'll do finish at this point. And it's then going to create basically a system image for Android running on that type of device. And whenever that appears, then we're going to be able to start and run an instance of it. So by way of doing this here, and this is the saving it's reasonably quick. Starting it up, you'll probably find takes a little bit of time. So there's my cheap tablet. It's taking up 650 megs on disk. So I'm going to boot it. Now, effectively, it emulates everything. So it emulates me turning this tablet on from a hard start. So whenever this happens, you're going to see the skin for the tablet appearing, and then we'll see the Android startup message within it. And it will take a little bit of time. Now, if you think back to the previous screen, I mentioned there was two things. There was either use host GPU acceleration, or there was save a snapshot. And unfortunately, they're mutually exclusive. You can't have both of them turned on, even though it actually would be quite desirable to have both of them turned on. How do they differ? They differ in a few fundamental ways. If you have use GPU turned on, it means that when it's emulating the tablet, it'll make use of the GPU that you have on your computer actually to run and to emulate the tablet. So that will speed up any of the graphics calls. And that's quite a useful thing, particularly for us because we are running a game. There will be a lot of different graphical calls that are blasted out to it. You can see here that we're going through our Android boot up screen. The other option was save a snapshot. And the difference that would make is that whenever we quit out of the tablet, it's going to save what we had available on it. So that when we next start it up, it doesn't have to go through this rather long-winded boot up sequence. It is almost as if you've got the thing powered up and you just start turning it on and off, so it's nice and fast. So it is swings and roundabouts. So now this is started up. Because we're creating a game, it makes more sense for us to want to have GPU acceleration turned on. Even if it does mean anytime we start this, there's going to be a little bit of a delay for it to appear. The nice thing is, when we have this up, we can go back to Android Studio, we can be coding away, we can run things, and we always just keep it running in the background ready to deploy to. Occasionally it'll crash, we need to restart it, but that's okay. So in terms of our emulated tablet, so this is a touch screen here. I can actually touch that for going in. I can also use the mouse as well. So again, it's if this is the first time it's powered up, so you get to see all of the normal tutorial screens that would be displayed. And there we're capable of emulating our cheap tablet running that modern version of Android. And again, it's quite, all of the normal things are there. We can go in. We can play about with it as we need to. So far so good. Now, before we have a look at getting things out, if you have an actual physical phone, you too can link that up. So again, plug this one. If you have your normal USB cable, you're plugging that one in. Now, for the phone to be usable, you have to enable developer mode in the phone. And that's a process of going into the settings on your phone. And normally down at the bottom of the settings will be one about the device. And in about device, you go down and you find the build number being displayed on it. And you have to tap that a total of 7 times on exactly the same button. After the third or fourth tap, it's going to sort of give you a countdown. And when you do that, then in the settings at the bottom, there will be developer options made available. And you want to be slightly careful with these ones because you can mess up your phone if you're not. But that will give you a lot of options and control over the phone. The one that's particularly important to turn on, and it's off by default, is USB debugging. So if you go down your developer options and find that and turn it on, what it means is that when you plug your phone into the computer, it's going to then come up and say, oh, connected it. And when we deploy, we've got a chance then of deploying to the actual physical device, the phone itself, or an emulator that we have running as well. And so it's up to you. A lot of people will have Android phones as part of the course with a number of tablets, which you can borrow one for the semester and use that to deploy your items to. You can use a bit of a mixture of them depending on what works best for yourself. So last thing I want to cover here is that we're deploying this to our phone, to a tablet, reel or emulate it. We need to get some information back from it about what's going on, how, any error messages, any reports. And there's lots of different ways we can do it. The most common way is through Logcat. And back in our Android Studio, down at the bottom, you'll see that there's an Android tab. If you click on that, it's going to bring up sort of a window that has lots of information and a number of tabs. So Logcat's the one by default, and you can see there's a bunch of stuff appearing in it. These are all messages that are being sent back by whatever Android devices you have attached on the system, and you can view the memory or CPU or different things available in it. You get a lot of churn appearing in this here. And when we're writing programs, we will be logging things out to this particular window, the Logcat window, and that will give us a way of working out what has happened in it. Now, a few little hints and tips just by way of making this more manageable, because, you know, as you can see, depending on how you go up, there is lots of information displayed within it. We can filter it at high level in terms of the type of message. So verbose is the default, you get everything. If I'm just looking for debug messages, I can see those. If I just wanted to see error messages, and again, there's a number of error messages from creating the tablet. So again, you can see those. If there was a certain keyword, I don't know, maybe field, there must be a few fields, there is. So if I want to pull it up, I can find that as well. What is often more useful, and this needs a little bit of a side. So whenever you log something out to the Logcat window, you've got two items of information that you'll pass in. One's going to be a tag, and the other then is going to be a message. And the tag is going to sort of say where this comes from. So you can tag the thing up. So over here, for example, Activity Manager. Actually, let's try go back here. So if we were to go, let's say, into clock. So the clock is fired up, and it should have, down at the very bottom, created a few items in our window. Let's see if we find any of them that are relevant to it. So task persistent, OpenGL render, art. Right, let's see if we can find one with time in it. I'm not sure if it is going to be time. Clock. Oh, so okay, alarm clock then. So we have a few of them appearing within that one. So if the name of our application was an alarm clock, this is the tag that we used, and we were having trouble finding it in the mass of things, what we can do is to set up a filter. So we're going to change our filter, and we can give it, let's say, my alarm app. And if I want, I can use regular expressions here in terms of either the tag or the message. So I can say that it was my alarm clock, and do OK. So that means then that no filters, I have everything. If I select my alarm filter, I'm just going to get messages being filtered out that came from it. So this means for the apps that we're creating, quite often you only use exactly the same tag when you're sending it out. And then inside Logcat, you can set up your own filter for that. So you don't need to be worried about all of the messages that are coming from the other devices or other components, unless you have some particular reason to want or need to do it. When we look at debugging, we'll come back to that a little bit more, because often, you know, this is one of our default ways of logging things out and getting some debug information. The full debugger itself is a lot more powerful. There we can get into breakpoints and stepping through and having a look at it, but we'll look at that later on. Last item I want to mention is the Android device monitor. So it's within our Tools Android menu. Now this will open up a piece of the Android framework that runs outside of the actual studio itself. Can take a little bit of time to start up, but it's quite a capable one. It's going to give us a vast amount of information about any device that is attached to the computer. So there, we've actually got two at the minute. You've got the cheap tablet, the thing we've emulated, and I plugged in my phone, so it's available down at the bottom. Within this here, there's you know, different things we can do. We can look at the threads, network statistics. If we wanted to, we could view the files that are on the device. Now, Emulator, you can see all of the files. If you plug your phone in, it's going to restrict it just the ones you're allowed to see. So it's sensible. If we had our emulator control, within this you can actually simulate phone numbers coming in if that was something relevant to your game, and so on. So it's quite a more in-depth, useful way of doing it. There's one reason why I mention this here, and it's over there on the screen capture button. So I click this. Now it's refreshing. It can take a little bit of time depending on platform, device, and things like that. But this will capture whatever is on the screen of the device into an image. So if you are, and quite often you will actually get into running these things in a physical device. The reason I say that is the emulator, the minute it supports single touch, so it's not really a multi-touch component, it's hard to play any sort of game on it. So you will end up running this in an actual physical device. If you find that you've got some odd behavior that isn't working well, and you want to be able to get a capture of it, for example, to send it in to me to look at, then this is a good way of doing that. So there it's appeared in full resolution, whatever was on the device. So you can use that, email it in, I can have a look at it. Just whilst mentioning there's a few other little things to say about the emulator. Quite a lot of people, sometimes when the emulator appears, it is located just off the top of the screen. In this case, actually, if you want to get it down, because you can't drag it down using normally by the bar at the top. So it was up there. Actually, Alt space will bring down the menu. You use the cursor keys to go down to move, and you can then use the cursor keys to move it down. Control F12, you can also use that to change the default orientation of the device from landscape to portrait and back and forth, again, if you have a need to change those. So that's all we want to say in this particular demo. Do try exploring the emulators and finding a setup that works reasonably fluidly on the platform that you're going to be doing your development on.